Hello everyone, I'm Nizzahon for Card Kingdom, and this is another episode of Planeswalker Profiles. In this episode, we're looking at everyone's favorite planeswalking pyromancer, Chandra Nalaar. She is, of course, going to be the focus of the very soon-to-be-released Core Set 2020, where she's actually receiving a whopping 4 Planeswalker cards. She has one at Uncommon, one at Rare, one at Mythic Rare, and one in a Planeswalker deck. This is significant for a few reasons. It's the first time a single Planeswalker has received so many Planeswalker cards in a single set, and these 4 Planeswalkers actually bring Chandra's total to 14, making her the most plentiful Planeswalker in the entire game. As usual, we'll be looking at all of Chandra's different incarnations over the years, with the exclusion of Planeswalker deck Planeswalkers, because those are intentionally powered-down Planeswalkers included in those introductory products, so they don't have any competitive history to talk about. Even if we take away Chandra's Planeswalker deck appearances, there are 11 Planeswalkers for us to look at in this video, so let's get started. Chandra's first appearance came in the very first set to feature Planeswalkers, Lorwyn, which came out in 2007. This set had 5 monocolored Planeswalkers, commonly called the Lorwyn 5. This Chandra does a pretty good job of embodying what you would expect a red Planeswalker to do. She can damage players with her +1, damage creatures with her -X, and do massive damage to both players and creatures with her ultimate. These sorts of abilities sort of establish what Chandra was about, and she has abilities like this on every single one of her Planeswalker cards going forward. However, 5 mana for a Planeswalker with such an underwhelming +1 ability was kind of rough, and as a result, she never really caught on at Magic's highest level. She does see a decent amount of play in EDH though, appearing in over 500 decks on EDH Rec. Chandra next appeared on the plane of Zendikar in 2009. Like all Chandras, Chandra Ablaze can do damage to stuff, in this case by discarding a card, provided it was red. Her -2 showcases the way that red is usually able to draw cards, that is, by discarding cards first and doing it symmetrically. Her -7 is pretty crazy, especially because her +1 and her -2 load up your graveyard with spells that you can then potentially cast for free. However, this Chandra may just be worse than Chandra Nalaar. Like her predecessor, she comes with a very expensive mana cost and an underwhelming plus ability. The fact that you can't discard mountains too for the effect is pretty frustrating, as it means sometimes the +1 just won't do anything. The -2 being symmetrical is also a bit frustrating too, especially because there were other Planeswalkers around that could just draw you cards. And while that ultimate is pretty sweet, getting there isn't easy because Chandra here doesn't do an excellent job of keeping herself safe. So, like Chandra Nalaar, Chandra Ablaze didn't see any competitive play. However, she does see more play in EDH than Chandra Nalaar, with more than 800 decks playing her on EDH Rec. EDH is a format where symmetrical effects play much better, and she also enables various discard and graveyard strategies, so that's good news for her. But yeah, Chandra is so far 0-2 when it comes to Grand Prix and Pro Tour top 8s. So far, Chandra was 0-2 when it came to finding success on Magic's competitive scene. Chandra next appeared in Magic 2012 as Chandra, the Firebrand. This was a Chandra that came with a much lower mana cost, and she basically had an upgraded version of the +1 that Chandra Nalaar had. Now she could damage creatures or players with her plus ability. Her -2 allowed you to copy spells, which is powerful in the right situations, and her ultimate let you damage 6 things, which is some serious business. However, once again, this Chandra still struggled to break through into competitive play. She started with very low loyalty, and doing 1 damage to things often just isn't enough, compared to other Planeswalkers around, who usually had some combination of card draw, creature tokens, and removal. Chandra really struggled. Her first 3 Planeswalkers really only had the removal part, and none of them were as good at it as you would hope a red Planeswalker to be. This Chandra, like the first 2, does see play in EDH, with almost 1,000 decks playing her on EDH Rec. So now, Chandra was 0-3, but her slump was about to end, and it would be in large part due to an interesting innovation on her next card, which is Chandra Pyromancer. This Chandra, who appeared in Magic 2014, would be the first Chandra to see play in competitive Magic, and she saw a ton. So what made this Chandra more successful than her predecessors? Well, a few things. We have seen Chandra's +1 ability become progressively more powerful as Wizards continued to attempt to make a good Chandra. This time around, she does 1 damage to a player and a creature, and makes the creature unable to block, which is just a huge upgrade over what she had before. While 1 damage may not kill a lot of creatures, making them unable to block is great in aggressive decks, especially when you're doing another point of damage to your opponent. So she has a far more powerful +1 than either Chandra Nalaar or Chandra the Firebrand, but this Chandra also excelled thanks to a 0 ability that was something we hadn't really seen before, and that is a way to create card advantage that isn't symmetrical and doesn't involve discarding, but still feels pretty red. Exiling the top card of your library for 0 loyalty and allowing you to play it until the end of your turn is basically like drawing a card. You just have to use that card that turn to get the value out of it. Luckily, that's not that hard, and if you use this before a land drop, you'll even be able to play a land off of it. By now, this type of exile card draw effect is sort of commonplace to us, but at the time, it was a big innovation. So now, Chandra had a removal ability and a card draw ability that were both pretty good. Her ultimate is a little inconsistent, allowing you to copy a spell in the top 7 of your library 3 times for free, but players didn't usually try to use her ultimate because of how good her other abilities were. As you probably guessed, this Chandra was at her best in aggressive decks, providing them ways to get in for extra damage and giving them extra gas off the top of their library when that was needed. She has filled that role in both Standard and Modern. Chandra next appeared as Chandra, Fire of Kaladesh in Magic Origins. Here, she was a creature who could transform into a Planeswalker, Chandra, Roaring Flame. On her creature side, Chandra had the ability to tap to do damage to players and could untap any time you played a red spell. This is the type of effect red decks love because it allows for considerably more damage from burn spells. If Chandra could do enough damage to an opponent in a turn, she would transform. Once she was Chandra Roaring Flame, she came with the ability to damage players with a +1, creatures with her -2, and an ultimate that not only did 6 damage to the opponent, but also gave them an emblem that would pretty quickly kill them. This Chandra had a home in Standard and Red aggro decks, where she could easily transform and provide much-needed reach. Chandra next appeared in Oath of the Gatewatch as Chandra, Flamecaller. They went back to a more expensive Chandra this time around, but unlike in previous attempts, this Chandra proved to be quite powerful. With Chandra Flamecaller, we see for the first time her ability to create elementals, with a +1 that makes 2 3/1 elemental tokens that have haste and die at the end of the turn. This is a very red way to make creature tokens, and it means that on her own, Chandra makes 6 damage a turn, which is a pretty fast clock for your opponent. She also has a decent 0 ability that provides you with some card draw, and she has a -X that damages all creatures. Unlike Chandra, Fire of Kaladesh, and Chandra Pyromancer, who excelled in aggro decks, this time around they created a Chandra who was a control player's dream. The fact that she could come down, sweep the board, and then start making elemental tokens was pretty great. And indeed, this Chandra was heavily featured in the control decks of Battle for Zendikar Block Standard. After having a rough start, there have now been 3 Chandras in a row that have found competitive success. Chandra's next appearance, though, has been her most successful to date. And that is Chandra, Torch of Defiance, who appeared on Chandra's home plane of Kaladesh. This Chandra costs 4 mana, starts with 4 loyalty, and has 4 abilities. That last thing is something very few Planeswalkers in the game have had, so it seems like in every way they wanted to push this Chandra pretty hard, and they certainly did. She comes with a +1 ability that lets you cast cards from the top of your library. This time around, you can't play lands with her card draw ability, but the nice thing was that, even if you hit a land, you still got some value out of it by doing 2 damage to your opponent. The flexibility there is very nice, because sometimes just making your opponent take 2 is going to be better than using whatever card you hit. Her other +1 helps you ramp a bit, her -3 lets you kill a reasonably sized creature, and her ultimate gives you an emblem that makes all your spells do 5 damage to a creature or player. This Chandra got most of her value, though, out of the card draw effect and 4 damage ability, as these 2 things could combine to keep her safe while helping you to just outcard your opponent. This Chandra has been a multi-format all-star already, seeing a ton of play in Standard, but also finding success in Modern and Legacy. On my own channel, I did a video on the best Planeswalkers in the history of the game based on how successful they've been at Magic's highest level, and she came in at number 3, which places her behind only Jace the Mind Sculptor and Gideon, ally of Zendikar. Not bad company to keep. This Chandra saw play primarily in Standard aggro decks, where she filled a similar role as Chandra, Pyromancer, providing you with extra gas and getting problem creatures out of the way. In Modern, she has seen play in Izzet Phoenix, and in Legacy, she sees play in mono-red prison decks. Chandra next appeared in War of the Spark, along with 35 other Planeswalkers. Starting with War of the Spark, Planeswalkers can have static abilities, and this Chandra comes with one of those. In her case, she punishes players who do damage to her, or pays you off for removing loyalty counters from her, by doing damage anytime one of those things happen. This might seem like kind of a small thing, but it's actually pretty nice to be able to play her and know that even in the most worst case scenario, she's going to do at least 5 damage to your opponent instead of just unceremoniously going to the graveyard and not helping you out at all. This Chandra comes with her by now very familiar ability to exile a card from the top of your library, which she lets you play until the end of your turn. And this is her only plus loyalty ability, but like in her previous incarnations with a similar effect, this really lets her shine as a card advantage engine. Eventually, if you get her loyalty to 7, that's when things can get particularly interesting. On its own, her ultimate honestly wouldn't be that impressive. You get to look at 7 cards from the top of your library and you can cast them until end of turn. Note that you still have to pay mana for them, so you aren't really going to be getting 7 cards out of the deal. However, thanks to her static ability, she also does 7 to your opponent when you use it, making the ability far more attractive and giving you a way to finish your opponent off, in many cases after using her +1 several times. This Chandra, like many of her previous incarnations, is the kind of Planeswalker mono-red aggro decks really want, between the card advantage and the damage she can do. Despite being fairly new, she's already found considerable success in Standard, and I think she will continue to going forward. And all of that brings us to the 3 new Chandras that are making their appearance in Core Set 2020. The uncommon Chandra is Chandra Novice Pyromancer, the rare one is Chandra Acolyte of Flame, and the mythic rare one is Chandra Awakened Inferno. Each of these is meant to show us some progression in her story, going from when she was still really in training, learning how to use her abilities, to the point that she is an absolute powerhouse of a Pyromancer. Chandra Novice Pyromancer shows us something new for Chandra with her +1, and that is that she likes elementals. We saw in Chandra Flamecaller that she could make elemental tokens, but all 3 of the Chandras in this set have an elemental theme going on. She makes your elementals bigger with that +1, she can ramp you with her -2, and she has a -2 that allows you to do 2 damage to anything. This Chandra looks to me like one of the better uncommons in the set for Limited, but unless there's a really strong elemental deck coming our way in Standard, I'm not sure she'll see competitive success. The rare Chandra, Chandra Acolyte of Flame, costs only 3 mana, which is always intriguing for Planeswalkers. At first glance, it may look like she can't raise her loyalty, but her first 0 ability allows you to put a loyalty counter on each red Planeswalker you control, and that does include her. Her other 0 ability continues that elemental theme by making 1/1 elemental tokens with haste, and she has a -2 that lets you flash back a cheap instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. This Chandra seems like she might excel in a Super Friends deck thanks to that first ability, and obviously she combos well with Novice Pyromancer with her second ability, because that makes the elementals into 3/1s instead. As I noted at the beginning, there are lots of Chandras, and just in Standard right now, it may be entirely possible to build a Chandra-centric deck, since there are so many Chandras right now. The Acolyte of Flame seems to be pushing you the most in that direction since she increases loyalty on red Planeswalkers. It will be interesting to see if such a thing comes to fruition. And finally, in her mythic rare form, she is Chandra Awakened Inferno. We saw that the first time Wizards designed a 6-mana Chandra, she turned out to be pretty underwhelming. This time around, I think they did it right. She has a static ability, making her the first non-War of the Spark Planeswalker with one of those, and this ability allows her to avoid being countered. Something else unique about her is that she has a +2 that allows you to make an emblem, making her the only Planeswalker who can make an emblem by increasing loyalty. The emblem is not the most impressive one, only doing 1 damage to your opponent every turn, but the fact that she increases her loyalty and can just keep slapping those emblems on your opponent means that she can represent a quick clock all on her own. Then she comes with a board sweeping effect that continues her elemental theme. It only does 3 damage to non-elementals. She then has a -X that allows you to do X damage to creatures or planeswalkers and exiles them if they die. The one thing this Chandra doesn't have that most really successful ones have had is a way to draw you cards. But her 2 removal abilities are so strong, and her emblem can win you games on its own, so I foresee this Chandra finding success somewhere in Standard, probably in a control deck, and who knows, maybe even in a Chandra tribal deck. So, Chandra may not have had the most impressive start, with 3 Planeswalkers who were kind of duds. Since then, though, every single Chandra Planeswalker that's been printed has found competitive success, and I think that's a trend we're going to continue to see going forward. That does it for this episode of Planeswalker Profiles. If there is a Planeswalker you want to see me cover in the future, let me know in the comments, and if you want to make sure you catch future episodes of this series, don't forget to subscribe. I'm Nizzahon for Card Kingdom, and thanks for watching.